Computer, there we go. Okay, we're recording, everyone. All right, and we're going to start off with the fulmar paper. And David, that is over to you, my friend. We've got we got the authors here. Françoise and Benjamin are online. So let me get you guys unmuted. And Benjamin, you're here. Bonjour, Françoise. Bonjour, Benjamin. Nice to see you. Welcome. And David, take it away.
Hi there. As usual, I'll do a short introduction about your paper, Benjamin and Françoise, and then we'll chat a bit. And I was really happy to see this paper pop up in the bibliography because at once I remembered that a bit more than 20 years ago, someone showed me stunning pictures on the internet. I thought actually the person who showed me these pictures was Francis Daunt, but he says it's not him. So if you're online and you think you showed me nice pictures from space, please drop me a line. So these pictures showed the Earth as seen from space at night. And there were lots of lights in Europe, in North America, East Asia, and of course, far less in Africa. Also, you could see that there was a big lump of lights in the China Sea. And I was told that those came from all the fishing vessels. At once, overfishing was becoming visible, even from space. Around about the same time, we were putting the first GLS tags on seabirds. And I remember reading through light levels recordings for black-browed albatrosses from the Falklands. Those had the usual night and day periodicity, but also showed odd light flashes at night. We guess that those were coming from squid fishing vessels, which use bright lights to attract their catch towards the sea surface, but I never found the time to dive into the matter. A decade later, around 2010, Clara Perron, during her PhD, looked at GLS data for white-fin petrels from Kerguelen, and she found similar light flashes when they were wintering in the Benguela. In a MEPS paper, she wrote that this information could be used to quantify seabird interactions with fishing vessels at night. And this is precisely the approach taken in a very neat paper led by Benjamin Dupuis from École Normale Supérieure and Françoise Amélineau from the Norwegian Polar Institute. The work is based on GLS tracking data for over 300 fulmars, gathered by a fine group of authors at 12 colonies in the eastern North Atlantic. From the maps they compile, we learned that the fulmars spend the interbreeding period in a vast area ranging from the southern North Sea to the northern Barents Sea, and a few of them cross the Atlantic to travel to mysterious places between South Greenland and Newfoundland. 88% of the birds had at least one night encounter with bright lights, and the authors found nearly 5,000 such encounters in the data set. That sounds like a lot, but if you put this in the perspective of the 120,000 bird nights they investigated, that translates to about 4% probability to encounter artificial lights per night. During these probable encounters, the birds increased their time spent foraging by a third, and they rested less. Also, the researchers found some level of specialization with birds from specific colonies which were more likely to encounter artificial lights at night. And also independently from the colony, there was also some level of specialization at the bird level. Then the authors overlaid the positions of the light encounters with maps of fishing activity from the Global Fishing Watch. And sure enough, they found that the probability of encounter was higher in wintering areas with intense fishing effort. So overall, the study looked at seabird fishery interactions across the vast geographic area, possibly the largest study of its kind. And it's focused on the eastern North Atlantic, which is important because we know that fulmars are commonly killed as bycatch in the region. The surprising element, nonetheless, is the relatively low frequency of night encounters, which suggests that fishery discards may represent a low proportion of fulmar diet during the non-breeding season. And this contrasts clearly with the picture we have of the fulmars as discard addicts. As you probably know, previous studies showed that this junk food made up to 3/4 of the bird's diet during the breeding season. So Benjamin, Françoise, and all the team, congratulations on this very neat study. In particular, I found that the methods were very thoroughly presented. And before I turn to the questions, I wanted to add also that there's a similar paper by Lucas Kruger, who looked at exactly the same issue in giant petrels in the Southern Ocean, if people are interested. Benjamin and Françoise, maybe for the audience, it might be worth telling us a little more on how exactly the fulmars feed. What sort of natural prey and what sort of catching techniques do they use in the North Atlantic in their environment?
Thank you. There you go.
First of all, thank you for inviting us and thank you for this very nice introduction. And just to present the work, so Benjamin did a master internship with me at the Polar Institute last year. So this is the work of his internship. And Benjamin, do you want to answer David's question?
Again, thank you for the introduction. And so regarding the foraging behavior of the fulmar, so they are not diving seabirds, they feed on the surface, and they mostly eat like small prey, like a bunch of small crustaceans and small fishes also. And yeah, that's it regarding the foraging. I guess I don't know if you want to add something.
No, and also in your analysis, what I didn't mention is that you were using the wet and dry sensors as an index of foraging activity. Maybe you can specify briefly how this worked.
Yeah. Should I? Okay, I go. Yes, so the GLS are equipped with a wet dry sensor. And so considering the fact that the fulmar are feeding when they are on the water, so when they are feeding, the logger is in the water. And so using the information recorded by the logger and considering like the proportion of time they are spending, the logger is wet or dry, we can assess if the bird is in the water, so foraging, if the bird is resting on the water, or if he's doing like interval of being in and out really quickly. So that's corresponding to foraging behavior. And when the bird is when the logger is mostly dry, so we consider that the bird is flying.
Okay, and as in many places, of course, in the North Atlantic, there's a big focus on bycatch. Where the bycatch is taking place and how to avoid it. So are there really clear bycatch hotspots in the North Atlantic for the fulmars?
Should I continue? Okay. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there is some bycatch hotspot, but there are obviously fishing hotspots, and so more fisheries you have, more likely seabirds are to be bycatched. So.
If I remember from your maps, you had such hotspots. Was it a bit farther from the North Sea? I don't remember that exact point. Maybe you could specify.
So the main fishing hotspots were in the North Sea around like the Faroe Islands. And also there was a lot of fishing activity around Iceland and in the English Channel and the Celtic Sea. But for both of these, we didn't had really birds going there, so we couldn't assess the interaction in this area.
And so
just
yes, go ahead.
there were also a lot of fishing activities in the Barents Sea. And I think that was the main area where birds encountered fishing vessels in our study.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the second area you sort of identified. And I guess from there, you know, the question people will be asking is what sort of mitigation measures can be taken. So I guess that depends a lot on the fishing activities, but are there already measures in place to avoid the bycatch?
We are not at all specialists of that question, so I'm sure there are people in the audience who know better the answer to that question.
I just know also that at the scale of the Nordic countries and also of the Arctic Council and its working groups, that's one of the current focus to synthesize all information about bycatch across the area. So I wonder, Françoise, because you're obviously the person who co-designed the study, was it made to answer to these questions, for instance, from the Arctic Council and the Seabird working group?
No, not directly. It's really because we saw those detections, detections in the raw light data, and we wanted to explore more to quantify those artificial light detections and to map them and so on. So not directly, but of course, this is something that could be useful for assessing where birds encounter fishing boats. And also that's something we would like to develop on other species as well.
Okay, yeah, no, that's in any case, you know, that's spot on with the current interest for this issue in the North Atlantic. I thought it was a sort of top-down dynamic, but obviously it started because you saw I would say the artifacts in the data set. That's right.
Yes.
Ah, okay, this way. Well, I still have one question, but maybe Grant, Marianna, or Amy would like to ask something, or people from the audience, feel free.
Yeah, Marianna, do you have a question you'd like to ask? Okay, Marianna, go for it.
Yes. So first of all, I want actually to praise Benjamin for actually sharing the code on GitHub. Well done. That is a great thing for a scientist. So well done for setting up a GitHub account and sharing the code. So yes, when I saw the link, I was like, yay, fantastic. So
only you would get nerded out by that, Marianna.
Hey. So yeah, I wanted actually to ask a question about learning and memory. If like in the future, like not right now with the data set, maybe you can with the data set that you have, but maybe you can basically see if if you track the same individual for multiple years, if it goes back to the same location following the same type of boats. Yeah, that I was wondering if you could see it, if you could implement the method in that way as well.
So from what I remember, I think so regarding, for example, the migrating pattern the fulmars are doing like throughout the year, there is an important fidelity, like they are more or less always doing the same patterns. And in the analysis, we also found that there was an important individual variation in the proportion of encounters. In fact, more important than the location of the colonies from the bird stems. So yeah, it could be really interesting to see how it evolved throughout the life of the bird, I guess. Yeah.
Yep, Great. If Amy wants to ask a question, or you, Grant, I can.
Amy, do you have any questions to ask at the moment? I'm seeing a shaking head. No.
I'm trying really hard to think of something clever to say, but I'll leave it to someone else.
I have a quick question then. So my question is, so you've looked at just generally fishing vessels. I'm wondering, have you looked at size of fishing vessels, or say light intensity from specific fishing? I mean, obviously, certain types of fishing vessels use brighter lights. You know, squid fishing vessels, for example, use massive lights to light up the. So then the question is then, is the signal you're seeing directly related to the type of fisheries that are out there?
Françoise, you want to take it?
So to our knowledge, there is no such squid fishery in the Northern Atlantic. So there is not one type of fishing boat that would have more intense lights than the others. But with the global fishing watch data, we also had the type of fishing gear used on each fishing vessel. So we had a look, but it was mostly the fishing types that were the most abundant, where the birds were, like, there was no clear link with one fishing gear, if I remember well. It's just that one type was more abundant where the birds were. So we think that there is not one fishery type with a more light that would be more attractive to the birds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also had the impression that but that's more for the Southern Ocean, that the information was quite binary. You know, you had light, no light. But a related question, and that's something you address nicely in the discussion, is that, of course, you know, there might be other sources of light. So there might be bright vessels which are not fishing, or whatever, oil rigs, or even coastal regions. So I guess, well, and in the discussion, you clearly called for caution about that. I don't know whether you wanted to add something about this point.
Just the fact that the activity shows that the foraging is increasing when they are in the vicinity of the boats, really strengthen the fact that it will be fishing boats, because fulmars are also known to follow the boats. So in case it would be any boat, we would expect more flying behavior than foraging, for example. So I think that was really the thing that made us think that we are actually detecting mostly fishing boats.
Yep.
In the chat, we've got a comment from Jennifer, who says, for mitigation in the Bering Sea, a portion of the fishing vessels are required to use bird diversion streamers, so mitigation techniques, to avoid bycatch. Additional recommendations include reducing lights and downshielding lights, so just putting shields over the top of the lights. And she says, I'd be interested in hearing more about other mitigation measures. So broadly, I guess, are there any mitigation measures in place in the North Sea to prevent light attraction?
I don't know. For my part, if there is, I'm not aware of it. I'm only aware of policies about discard and reducing discards, but not about the lights the vessels are emitting.
Mm-hmm. What about bycatch mitigation measures? Do they use streamers on fishing vessels in the North Sea? I'm not sure personally, but
I don't know. Maybe Françoise, I don't know if you know, but I don't know.
No, sorry, I don't know either.
That's
but
okay.
Maybe some people in the audience.
Yeah, if there's anybody in the audience who has a comment, please do feel free to speak up or forever hold your peace. Okay.
Yeah, I just thought about something. So there's probably a detection threshold for a light signal by the GLS logger. So probably there's a way to tell what's the minimum light source for something to be recorded in the middle of the night. You see, or is it tricky to infer this way? You see what I mean?
Yes, I see what you mean, but I think it would be quite tricky to, like, it's quite difficult to link the light level with what we record on the GLS. So it could also be just the angle between the bird and the light, for example, on the boat, or the weather, or so. I think that would be quite difficult with the GLS to get this information.
Yep.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. So would you expect then that the light signal that you would detect on the GLS tags, would that be lower in, say, foggy weather? So your data might be, or your analysis might be biased more towards, say, clear weather days.
I think at the distance the birds are from the boat, or if they are really foraging at the really close to the fishing vessels, I don't think it would make a difference. But this is something we see when we analyze the GLS data. When the weather is cloudy, for example, you see differences in the time of sunrise and sunsets. But yeah, I was more thinking maybe of the angle between the GLS logger on the leg of the bird and the light of the fishing boats, for example. Yeah.
All right. So we're at
Phil. Yeah.
Oh, Phil has got a question. Go for it.
Yeah. So in the Southern Ocean, in foggy conditions, you often get massive attraction of variety of seabirds to vessels. So tourist vessels, when they've got their lights on, will have enormous numbers on the decks in the following day. And I was wondering whether there might be differential attraction in different weather conditions. So I think that might be quite interesting to look at.
That's a really good point. We haven't looked at that at all. And I don't know if it's easy to have weather, like foggy data for the Barents Sea, for example, or at sea, but it's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know how you would actually check it out independently, because fog patches can be quite constrained, but if there were ways of doing it, I think it'd be interesting.
And Phil also means all the flashes from the wildlife photographers on the tourist boats, of course.
Absolutely, David.
Blinding the birds.
I don't think they are going at night anyway, so it should be fine.
That'd be an interesting boat tour. Nighttime seabird tours, drawing them in with big bright lights. All right. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I'm not seeing anybody turning their cameras on or throwing shoes or putting their hands up. David, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask the authors?
No, I think clearly we're missing someone from the Seabirds at Sea team for the North Sea. Entirely my mistake. I should have made sure we had one of them to tell us everything about the behavior of fulmars behind vessels in the northern North Sea. Of course, from what I remember, they certainly come really close, especially behind trawlers.
Yeah. There's a quick comment down in the chat from Sari, who says, I think as far as mitigation measures, there are researchers wanting to explore this further at the Norwegian Institute for Nature Research. So looking at sound and movement. So we're related to mitigation.
So we're not too far behind the current information.
Yeah, that's certainly what it seems like. Oh, very good.
I wanted to
No, please go ahead. Go ahead.
But maybe it's completely wrong, because I actually don't know. I was wondering about the detection of illegal fishing, but they would switch off the light during the night if they are fishing illegally, or I don't know. No,
I wouldn't imagine.
But that's something. There are some studies by Global Fishing Watch looking at that. So what David was presenting at the beginning, they use satellite pictures to look at the light, of the fishing vessels, and then they match it with the AIS data, and they can detect the illegal fisheries like that.
Okay, so you could actually like use this to detect some illegal fishing.
Yes, but in our case, the problem is that the location with the position with the GLS is quite inaccurate, so it would be really difficult to link it with a particular boat.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
Fascinating. Alrighty. Does anyone have any more questions for the authors? David, Amy, Marianna? No? Okay, we're all feeling good about that.
Yeah,
well,
thanks for joining.
Yes, thank
Stay
you.
With us.
Thank you very much, Françoise. Thank you, Benjamin. Lovely having you. We'll move on to the next paper now in just a minute. But before we do, I thought I'd plug a couple of things. First, and most importantly, of course, is that the next time that Seabird sessions meet, which is on April 1st, so in a couple weeks' time, it's our 1-year anniversary. So we've been operating for a year, unbelievably. So it would be really awesome if all of you showed up and asked your friends to show up. We hopefully make a big deal out of it, and lots of people come for what should be a grand time. David, Marianna, and myself will wear hats. We can promise there will be hats. So hashtag Grant's hat will make an appearance. So that's the first. The second is that we've got Amy Hall with us, and Amy is doing this really fantastic YouTube series called 60-Second Zoology. If you get a chance, you're on Twitter or you're on YouTube, look up hashtag 60-Second Zoology and follow her fantastic videos. They're really informative, really fun, and really animated. So yeah, please do follow along with those. It's great. The next is the Early Career Scientist Coffee Hour, which is being hosted by the World Seabird Union. Oh yeah, Amy has posted a YouTube link in the chat, so click on that. A shameless plug, as she says. There's no such thing as shameless plugs. We're okay with those around here. So Early Career Scientist Coffee Hour, it's basically an opportunity for you to hang out with people, learn about their interesting career paths. Usually it'll be someone who's done something fascinating with their lives, and you get to sit around and an informal sort of setup and discuss with them how they got to where they are. Now the next one, you'll have to bear with me just a second because I was very unorganized and forgot to actually open the link so I could just read this to you. If you go to seabirds.net and then you go up to events on the top and go to ECS Coffee Hour, you'll see the next event, which is on March 22nd. So that's Monday at 1800 GMT. And that's with Rob Thomas. And there is a Zoom link on that site. I'm going to post that link down in the chat. So if you guys are interested in joining in, please do. It's going to be a really lovely event. The last couple have been very good. And like I said, they're very informal, very relaxed. Bring a gin and tonic if you want, or put Bailey's in your coffee. I mean, that's typically what I do. Not on a daily basis, but every so often. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you can.
Now you said it, we don't believe you. I mean,
of course. All right, and I think with that, we'll move on to the next paper, and Amy is going to be presenting this one. And we've got the authors. We've got Vicky. Where's Vicky? I know she's on here somewhere. Hang on.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Hello, Vicky. Nice to see you. And we've got Phil Trathan, of course, the fantastic Phil. Nice to see you both. It's really great. I haven't seen you guys well, Phil, I spoke to you the other day, but Vicky, I haven't seen you in a while. I think it was last time I was down to Bass. And I got to see you. All right, Amy, please take us away.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to have a stab at this. It's my first time presenting anything for Seabird sessions, so don't be too mean. So for a bit of background to me, and also why I wanted to look at this paper, I'm currently a master's student with Exeter University, and my master's project is using BAS data to look at whether there's relationships between the mass of chicks from Bird Island and any anomalies in environmental indices. So this was like a really nice paper that kind of looked at the overall Antarctic Peninsula ecosystem to see whether there were environmental drivers influencing distribution and densities of Procellariiforms in this region. So this paper was a collaboration between authors from the BAS, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, University of California and Bangor Uni, to have a look at distributions and abundances of Procellariiforms within the Northern Antarctic Peninsula marine ecosystem. So the Antarctic Peninsula is part of the planet which is rapidly warming, like the rest of the planet, but obviously at a higher degree, with effects at sea which have the potential to impact both the abundance and distribution of whole ecosystem components, sea surface temperature anomalies and ocean freshening as a result of the release of fresh water from Antarctic ice, along with many other changes, can direct prey species distributions, which in turn impact predatory species higher up trophic chains. And seabirds are already declining, and ones are predicted to continue to decline, like the Adelaide penguin, and the distributions of many are predicted to shift with regional warming. Of course, there's not just environmental drivers, there's also anthropogenic disturbance and competition among fish stocks. And in the Antarctic Peninsula region, of particular concern is the commercial harvest of krill, which is the main prey item for many Southern Ocean seabirds and other marine predators. So Procellariiforms are a species group which are highly mobile predators, and using ship surveys and hurdle models, which for anyone like me who didn't know before, these are models for count data which help to handle lots of zero counts and over dispersion of the data. And the authors have estimated the summer distributions and relative densities for 11 seabirds within the Northern Antarctic Peninsula marine ecosystem. Procellariiforms are the most abundant seabird species in this region, and previous studies have highlighted associations between broad-scale environmental features and species distributions. So the results from this paper found that sea surface temperature and sea depth were the variables most frequently associated with seabird occurrence and had the greatest explanatory power across many of the 11 species. The models reflect known species hotspots and habitat associations and can be used to benefit assessments of crucial habitats and the potential responses of species to climate change and interactions with humans at sea. And this is particularly important when we think back to krill fisheries, as environmental change puts a lot more pressure on seabirds and all of the other predators within marine ecosystems. So hopefully that gives a very brief overview of the paper to sort of open up the questions to the authors. Something that I was particularly interested in seeing what they would think. So in my data from my masters, I found species graded responses, and I assume, well, that was found in this paper. I wonder whether the authors identified species that could actually maybe do better under climate change conditions compared to others, and if so, which species this would be. I don't know which of the authors want to answer that question.
That is a really interesting question that we didn't actually look at all. We use the most commonly observed environmental variables that are often associated with predator distributions in the models, but predominantly our objective was to model the distribution of the seabirds more in relation to the managing the krill fishery than for looking at climate factors. I'm pretty sure we did publish the response curves in the supplementary material, which means that potentially by looking at the response curves, we could see which of the species prefer the warmer areas or the cooler areas or peak in different temperature gradients, and use that to identify which ones would potentially do better off with the changing climate. But we didn't actually look at that at all, to be honest. Phil, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so if we move beyond the Procellariiforms, the Picocelid penguins are definitely showing responses that are indicative of, so gentoo penguins are moving south, their range is extending, their populations are increasing further south. So not in the Procellariiforms, but in other seabird taxonomic groups, then we do see those sorts of responses. And if you go to other places in the Scotia Sea, so South Georgia, then you definitely see responses from some species rather than so climate change winners and climate change losers.
Very interesting, thank you. And I guess the other main question I had was whether there was any other locations in the Southern Ocean or globally that would be useful for looking at this type of study, because you mentioned the importance of establishing baselines to understand where seabird populations are at and where they're going. So do you know if there are any plans to do anything anywhere else, or if you could, where else would you have a look at what's going on?
So to give a bit of background into what we've been doing and why we did it, we started to look at this because we're both working, we do a lot of work with CAMLAR, which is the Commission for the Conservation of the Antarctic Marine Living Resources, who are trying to establish krill catch limits and help manage the krill fishery with a more ecosystem-based approach. And in order to do that, we need to understand in more detail about which predators are consuming krill, where they're consuming it, and how much they're consuming. So we've had a very, very focused approach on the Northwest Antarctic Peninsula to try and gather as much information about as many species as we can about how much krill they're eating. So again, I'm afraid to say we haven't looked elsewhere at all and have no idea. I have no idea personally about what's happening elsewhere in Antarctica or globally, and have focused on trying to understand so flying seabirds have never really been included in any of the CAMLAR decision-making or the ecosystem-based management. A lot of their ecosystem-based management looks at, they do a lot of monitoring of the penguin populations, the fur seal populations, and some, they do use the albatrosses as well, actually, I think. But that's predominantly been what's included. So this new approach is to try to understand the amount of krill taken by all the different krill predators, including those which have previously been missed out. So that's why we've started to look at the flying seabirds here. And we've got other analyses developing where we're trying to incorporate the fin whales and the humpback whales and looking at fur seals. And basically we're trying to do everything we can, but just in a very, very small location, to at least try to start to help moving towards ecosystem or better ecosystem-based fisheries management in that area.
Can I add a little bit to that? So folk will probably remember that the krill fishery probably started in the 1960s, and it started in East Antarctica, so south of South Africa. And through the 70s, it mainly focused in East Antarctica, and then moved in the 80s to the Southwest Atlantic. And gradually the fishing fleet changed from mostly Soviet vessels and Japanese vessels. It's now principally Norwegian vessels, and it only operates in the Southwest Atlantic. But there is still catch quotas in East Antarctica. So the CAMLAR's historically worked with a way of setting quotas which is very large scale, because it's a very data poor fishery. But as catches have increased in recent years, and as fishing hotspots have developed where thousands of tons are taken from within very small areas, often offshore of seabird or seal colonies, there's been a recognition that it needs to manage at a much smaller scale than the ocean basin scale, which it used to do historically. And so it's now got an approach for management which is based on 3 legs. So increasing the number of surveys to get estimates of biomass, redeveloping a yield model to say how much biomass can be harvested, and then a risk assessment, which is where can you take that krill without impacting upon natural predators. And basically what we've been doing is setting up a pilot study for the peninsula where the best data are, which then hopefully will get rolled out across the Scotia Sea, and as the fishery probably will develop in East Antarctica in that area as well. So it's been, Vicky's done an amazing job on some of the modelling, because we've now got estimates for some taxa which we didn't have previously, like flying seabirds.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I don't know if anybody else has any more questions for you guys.
David, you look like you've got one.
Yes. So yeah, I'm really interested in what you said, Phil, about the krill fishery, and what I heard about fishing activities in this area. I heard people saying, well, we'd better have a managed krill fishery than no official fishing activities, and then the return of illegal fishing vessels. Is that a thought in this system?
So krill is a low value product, which mostly goes into making pet food, feed for aquaculture, and Norwegian vessels are now starting extracting krill oil from krill, which is actually a high value product. But generally the products are low value, so it's very unlikely that you'll get IUU.
Yeah, and of course this type of harvest is per se debatable if it's, as you said, you know, a low value fishery.
Yeah, I mean the ethics of whether you should take krill from a biodiverse ecosystem to feed to cats and dogs, I think is questionable. But the ethics of it aside, it is legal. And given that it's legal, it should definitely be managed in a precautionary, sustainable manner. And so a lot of people I know and work with don't really think there should be a fishery, but given that it is allowed to exist, it should be absolutely as sustainable as possible.
What are they using the oil for?
Nutraceuticals. So health food products.
Yeah, you can go get
your hair, apparently.
Yeah, you can get krill oil tablets in the shop.
Oh, and omega-3, isn't it? It's a good source of omega-3, I think. Yeah. Brain activity.
Oh, Jan, yeah, don't show off, Jan.
I never felt that this was absolutely necessary.
But Berger, I don't know where you're based, but in the UK, in Holland and Barra, and in Boots, you can buy krill capsules over the health food counters.
Yeah. David, do you have any more questions?
Jan had one.
Jan, do you have a question? You look like you might have a question. You should ask a question.
No, anyway. Jonathan, sorry.
Oh, Jonathan's got a question.
Yeah, John showed up as well.
Yeah, right. Go for it, Jonathan.
Hi, guys. Thanks very much, guys. Nice. I'm just looking at this paper. It looks really cool. Thank you. I've got two questions, actually. My first one's about the krill, to follow on from that. I mean, this krill story, you know, and the kind of demand for new krill products, it seems that this is quite a slow growth, though. And I'm curious as to whether it's the market for krill oil, you know, is actually just not growing much yet. I mean, I remember putting a picture of a krill oil tablet on a lecture slide like 8 years ago. You know, is the market growing, or is it that it's being limited through regulation that's preventing growth through the kind of precautionary measures that you're talking about?
The fishery used to be the single species most fished, well, it still is the species most fished by tonnage in the Antarctic. So back in the Soviet era, something like 500,000 tons were taken annually. After the Soviet Union broke up, catches dropped to less than 100,000 tons. But they are now growing again. So last year it was about 450,000 tons. And the big change has really been with a continuous fishing method, where basically they put a beam trawl in the water, pump out the cod end, and they don't need to set or haul the nets. They can just keep fishing continuously. And those vessels can take about 1,000 tons a day.
Okay.
The potential, and it's, as you say, Johnny, it's about the potential. It's not about the actuality. But Russia went out of the fishery when the Soviet Union broke up, but they just notified to fish again this year. China are now a big player in this. China's got a lot of aquaculture. Clearly, Norway's got a lot of aquaculture. So I think this will probably all eventually go into aquaculture feed.
That's cool. Thank you. My second question is more about the data. Just looking at there's a huge amount of data in here, right? This is a huge surveying effort by our American friends over 10 years. What's that? I mean, has these data been looked at before you looked at these, Vicky, or have they been kind of waiting for you to come along for the last decade to swoop in and weave your magic?
So Jared Santora, who's one of the co-authors on our paper, has published a couple of papers using this data or data from these surveys. Whether it's exactly the same years, I'm not sure. And he's very much more focused on hotspot analysis, and so has done at least 2 papers looking at the different hotspots and how they're changing over time. I can't actually remember the details, but he'd not used this kind of data for the habitat modelling or any kind of fine scale distribution. There were, I'd guess, something like 100 km² cells on his papers, whereas mine's at a much finer scale, but looking more at the hotspots of multi-species.
And is there more that could be done as well? Is this like a great resource, or have you squeezed it dry?
Interesting. I've had comments back on a different paper, and one of the reviewers suggested using different methods to account better for flux, which we didn't account for very well in our paper or in the survey, the way it was designed itself, and also to use, I can't remember exactly how, but they suggested a method. I think Clark et al. Had previously been able to understand more about the demographics of the birds that have been seen, which we were unable to do. We just looked at numbers and didn't have any idea of breeding stage. So if we were able to get some kind of demographic data out of it, which the reviewers of this paper clearly thought was possible, but I haven't looked into the methods how, and I'm wary that after the data has been collected, if demographic data hasn't been collected, then I'm not quite sure how it would work, but that's a potential.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. We do have a question from Emily. Actually, I think it's a question from Michael, and she's got, oh, Michael, it's Michael, it's not Emily. Hi,
yeah,
Michael.
We're sharing the screen. Hey, everyone, and
hi, Emily.
Thanks for the paper. My question, I posted it in the chat too, is about time. I was really intrigued by the graphs that showed how the encounter rate basically varied across month and year. And it seemed like there was quite a lot of variability there. And I'm wondering if there are maybe interesting patterns there that are worth exploring, or what is the, is there more there that you can talk about?
It was interesting. What happened in 2005? It's quite interesting. You look at 2005 and those graphs, and there's some interesting peaks in some species like gray-headed albatross, fulmar, and black-belly storm petrel.
That is a good question. I'd mostly used these plots just to determine whether there were long-term trends, in which case we should really be cautious of trying to take an overall average. And for most species, I didn't think that there did look like there were long-term trends. And so we decided to just continue doing this overall average for all of them, ignoring any interannual variation. So we know that krill is subject to massive interannual variation. There are really good krill years and there are really, really poor krill years. And so there's a good chance that these different distributions will be associated with the different krill years. And if they're having a good year, potentially there's a higher breeding success. Also, I know that a lot of the albatross species breed on South Georgia and fly, and they're not breeding down here, they're just visiting, and that they change their foraging distribution as well, according to the resources around South Georgia. So potentially in years with different food abundance in South Georgia, you'll have a higher or lower influence of some of those species in this area. That would be my best on the spot guess. Phil, any?
Yeah, so with this new three-legged stool that Camel's developing, what we're trying to do is look at the average state. So we're not necessarily interested in the interannual variability, but just to see where on average, the most risky areas are for harvesting. But I think the Antarctic is renowned for its interannual variability and intra as well as interannual variability. So I think these data would bear further scrutiny, to go back to Johnny's question, about some of those questions which are different to the questions that we've tried to address.
Great. Thanks for the question, Michael/Emily. And we do have another comment from Ellie, who's just identifying herself there. She's got her camera on, and she's saying that she's looking at flying seabirds in the eastern Weddell Sea, focusing on snow petrels. So it might be worth having a conversation at some point. All right, do we have any questions? David, do you have any more questions for the authors, or Marianna perhaps?
Maybe just a small point. So there's indeed also fulmar data in this paper, and on the maps I saw that for fulmars and also Wilson's storm petrels, they tended to differ from other species in using more the southern part of the study area. I wonder what's the ecological explanation for that distribution. Did I read the maps correctly, that most species you had higher abundances further to the north, and then fulmars and Wilson storm petrels they tended to be lower at higher latitudes?
So I think you did read those correctly. I was just looking at the plot, sorry, to catch myself up. And I think it's less of the latitude, but more whether it's kind of more a coastal distribution or a further offshore distribution. So the fulmars and the Wilson's petrels both breed in the peninsula region in the South Shetland Islands, and they were observed much more frequently in the Bransfield Strait and in the coastal areas, whereas a lot of the species either don't breed here or just tended to be much further out and further offshore. And so I think the latitudinal gradient isn't actually that strong. It's more the depth of the water, and I think the water temperature is very different in the nearshore area compared to when you get up to the northwest of the models. The sea surface temperature is quite a couple of degrees warmer up there. So it may have...
No, I just found this surprising to see the fullness so coastal, so to say, and close to the continent. Whereas, you know, if you would be in the North Atlantic, there would be one of the species really ranging far out. But that niche seems to be taken by other Procellariiforms in that system.
I see your point, actually. Yeah, I wonder how much of it is to do with the fact they're breeding here, and if it was the surveys are in January, February time, they're going to be quite constrained to return frequently to land. So that might have been why the abundances were so high in the nearshore areas, potentially.
Yep.
Amy, do you have any more questions for the authors?
No, I'm all good. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Lovely. Yeah, we've got a stuffed gannet on the camera today.
And maybe one last one. I was wondering, from historical expeditions, there must be observations at sea in these areas. You know, when Charcot or these guys they went to the Antarctic Peninsula. So I wonder whether there's any chance to link up with historical data, whether it has ever been attempted, or whether the data density is just too low for historical times.
That would be really interesting if we were to be able to get hold of that data. It would be really interesting to see how things have changed, and even if we couldn't, I guess, get exact, you know, if they weren't systematic surveys in the way they're done now, if they were more kind of observed just accidental observations, it would still potentially we could look at the proportion of the different species that were observed then compared to how the proportions change now, and that could potentially give us some insight into how these ecosystems are changing. That would be really cool to look at.
Yeah, I agree. I think that'd be really cool because, I mean, this area, as we know, had massive perturbation through sealing and whaling and then fin fishing. So there were anticipated major changes because of the reduction of all the marine mammal consumption of krill. But some of these species aren't krill feeders. So it would be really interesting to look at historical stuff. I don't have any contacts with any of Charcot's archives.
Yeah, I know you gotta try and find their ancestors.
Yeah, I have no idea whether they. Yeah, I have no idea whether they recorded birds, but at least when they overwintered, they were recording all sorts of stuff.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. All right, I think we're up to time here now. So if there's any more questions, please speak your piece. I don't see anybody. All right, very good. Well, Vicky, Phil, thanks so much for joining us. Amy, thank you very much for presenting that paper and joining us today. It's been lovely having you on. And for those of you who are planning to join us on April 1st, remember this is our 1-year anniversary. So it should be a fun event. What we'll do is we'll show off some of the metrics that we've gathered over the last little while. Marianna has done a fantastic job of pulling together a site-specific map. So she's got a nice animation put together that shows all of the study sites that we've covered since we started this last year. We've also done a bit of a survey to show which countries we've covered and the like. So it should be very, very cool. And of course, as I said, David, Marianna, and I will be wearing hats, and you can't miss that because, you know, David in a hat. I mean, come on. It's going to be fantastic. And again, don't forget the ECS coffee hour on Monday for those of you who want to come in and join in on that. The link is on the website. I posted a link down in the chat there if you go up to the top. And if you get lost, just go to seabirds.net/events and you'll see it in there. Yeah, I think that's it. Well, I think I'll stop recording now and